We like to think that we're masters of our own destiny and that the career choices that we make are all planned, or at least we're aware that they're coming and we're ready to pounce at the opportunity. But really, a lot of our career progress comes down to luck and who you meet along that path. So I'm going to talk about some of those people who aren't responsible for my career, but have had a huge influence on it. Well, I'm approaching retirement and it's not imminent. I'm still available for work and my intention is to keep active intellectually and with clients for a while yet. But recently I've begun thinking a little bit about the people who I've met during my career who've had a really big impact on it, because there's been half a dozen people at various times in my career, from very beginnings, almost pre-work, right the way through to the decision that I took almost 20 years ago now to give up corporate life and become an independent consultant. And I thought it would be good to reflect on some of those people, because I'm grateful for them. And there's one or two who will know that they've had a major impact on how I've done and who I've become, and others possibly less so. But I think, like most of us, when we're in some sort of a career, that there are people that we meet and there's a lucky crossroads where we take the right turn, and it can have a dramatic effect on where you end up when you're 60, which is where I am right now. One of the things about Miko was that he was a little bit smarter than I was. He got into grammar school and I just failed to make the grade. He was a slightly better footballer than I was, although we were both dead keen and above average, maybe I'd say these days. And he was always one step ahead in terms of getting the girl. And he got married quite young, and his first child quite young too, while he was up in Scotland, at university in Stirling. But one of the great things about the relationship Mick and I had was that even though that, as I've suggested, he was one step ahead, we got on like house on fire, and we egged each other on. We got into self-improvement, started reading difficult books, and then discussed them. Often we talk about these books and the impact they had on each other long into the night, until famously one night we were still talking at dawn when his wife got up in the morning to make a cup of tea. But he was an inspirational lad and a very, very good mate. But what he got me thinking about, and I guess we did this for each other, was that our upbringing as working class lads in Newcastle didn't have to define us. It's that we could branch out and go and do something else, do something with our lives. And although it's many years now since I've seen or heard of him, there's no denying that he had a major impact on me getting started in what became my career. guess I should talk about these as the early years, just starting out after I left school at 16, and by a strange fortune I ended up working in an office rather than a factory shop floor, which at the time, given my school grades, was the most likely place I was going to end up. After a number of years, I'm also extraordinarily grateful to the person who probably had the most impact on my career and the life I live today, even though at the time he probably thought it was quite a modest intervention, and that's Dick Wood. Dick was a marketing manager at the Tyne-and-Wear Passenger Transport Executive, and what Dick did was that he saw in me just a kind of fun-loving young guy who was a bit of a laugh around the office, but something where he saw that my potential went beyond my academic achievements at that point. And I'm not sure whether it feels like now that he decided, but I'm sure it wasn't his decision, of course, but it was almost like he decided that I needed to go to college, and in fact Newcastle Polytechnic, to study business and specialise in marketing, because that was Dick's field, but also it was an area that I was interested in. So he did everything he could to encourage me to take the risk of giving up a monthly salary, very modest career ambitions at that point, and then decide to take the leap into full-time education. And he had connections at the Newcastle Poly. I think he was doing some part-time lecturing. I can't remember at the time what was going on at the time, but suffice to say that I took his advice, and kind of the rest is history. I suddenly, after a difficult start where I wasn't quite sure how to benchmark myself against the other students who were all a few years younger than I was, it became apparent very quickly that I was smarter than most of them, and I did extraordinarily well and enjoyed it to boot. But Dick's support and help didn't end there. He was always there for advice and support, and when I left, and in fact not just when I left but between years at the Polytechnic, him and his wife Barbara, who was also very supportive, and great fun, the pair of them. There were times during the holidays that I would go to Dick and Barbara's house in Gosforth, and they would set me up with the paint brushes, the paint and the sandpaper, and then but also with a flask of pina colada or something like that, and kind of leave me for the afternoon or all day, and I would be quietly painting and getting slowly sloshed until they came home and then joined me. Fun times, fun times. Yeah, forever grateful to Dick for setting me on this path. One of the most important people I met was Brian Oakley. Now, Brian was originally from East Anglia and began a career in manufacturing and became a specialist in purchasing, what we now know as procurement. And he was the guy who took me on when I left Black & Decker in 1989 and joined Lucas, and for initially about 2.5 years in Bradford in West Yorkshire. And Brian was hugely influential on me. It was my first supervisory role, management role, and I made a few mistakes, the usual ones, but Brian was incredibly supportive and such a great man manager, not just with me but with other people in the team. So approachable, very knowledgeable, of course, an ace negotiator, very good at building relationships with suppliers, and actually very good at building relationships with internal stakeholders. But he could be tough, but always supportive and always very positive. One of the interesting twists with Brian was that when in 1998 I joined Rolls-Royce and became procurement director, Brian was looking for a job and I took him on. So the mentor to me became somebody who worked in my first line management team, and obviously a very close confidant, very supportive. What became interesting in my relationship with Brian is that although both of us were kind of procurement anoraks and we discussed strategy a lot and what we might do, there was an interesting tension sometimes between he and I, as I asserted my kind of leadership on occasion, and usually not over the work. We didn't really argue over the work, but Brian he'd got divorced sadly and was living on his own in Derby, and he wasn't the best timekeeper, so occasionally we'd have a Monday morning management meeting where Brian, even though he lived a few miles away from work and I was travelling about 35 miles to work, he was late for the meeting. And so on a couple of occasions I locked him out of the meeting and he could see through the glass that I was there with the first line management team, and we wouldn't let Brian in because he on those occasions he was tardy. So that wasn't fantastic in terms of our relationship, but you know, we shrug it off, and I've still got today a huge amount of respect for him, not just as a manager and a leader, but I think he's a really good bloke. I think he's really a good family man. Even though he was divorced, I think he's always supported his children and his grandchildren, and I do nothing but wish him well. A great guy, and I'm really grateful to him. I'm exploring parts of the park I've never been in before, even though I've lived here for over 20 years. Another person who was really important and became really important for a very long time was Robin Marr. Robin and I met at Newcastle Polytechnic, and we quickly established ourselves as the two probably highest achievers on a course. Although he always beat me. Well, not always, but mostly always. He was academically stronger than I was. But we share a love for music, although I have to say he's a hard rocker and I have much more eclectic and varied taste than he does. But one of the things that Robin gave me, as well as someone to discuss business or careers or personal development or professional development, is that there was a motivation, and we were, probably still are, a little bit competitive with each other. I want him to do well, but not as well as me, and he's probably the same. But he's built a career in sales and me in procurement, and there's a lot of parallels there where we've shared some good stories and good advice over the years, and he's still doing it. He's a few years younger than I am, so we've got a few more years left before he considers retirement. One of the kind of slightly sad things about approaching retirement is the idea that a lot of your knowledge and expertise is going to retire with you. So I have this rough plan is to try and get as much of my knowledge out into the world, short of writing a book, so that when I retire I can look back, or the people can take some benefit from it, and perhaps it's out there for my daughters to look at in quiet moments at some time in the future. So it's kind of a bit of a melancholy period, but I must say that everybody who I know who's already retired isn't looking back. They seem incredibly happy and contented and looking forward to the future, so I suspect that's going to be me too.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Michael opened me up to things I'd not really considered before. Michael came in when I was at Rolls-Royce under the sponsorship of my boss to do some coaching and mentoring of the senior members of the procurement team, and he and I shared a love for Bruce Springsteen's music, so we kind of hit it off kind of straight away. We had something in common, but he became a coach and a mentor, and of course he helped me kind of think about strategy a little bit, although not procurement strategy, more around leadership and how I can get the best out of the team. But it was much more than that. Michael also helped me step onto, dare I say it, a spiritual path, which perhaps I've not sustained as much as I'd anticipated, but his influence is still strong today, 20 years after I met him. Well, our interest in Springsteen meant that we went to many concerts together, 2 or 3 times to Paris, Scotland, to London, to Wales, Manchester. Yeah, we were dead keen on Springsteen's music. I'm kind of less enamored with it these days. I've kind of Springsteened out, but we had some great times and some great trips. Michael was really interested in looking after men. He was in the 1980s, part of the, I think he called it the men's movement, which was how to help men deal with the difficulties that they face in the world. Uncertainty over masculinity and depression and a whole host of other different things. But he was used to doing coaching and counselling with men and women over a considerable amount of time, and it became his business. That and helping organisations do change projects, or transformations as we call them. He's very, very adept at working with people at a personal level, helping them to see deeply into who they were and how they conduct themselves in the world for their benefit and for the benefit of people around them in the workplace. And so he got me to think a lot, and one of the things I learned from him, which is really important, is that I was too concerned about what other people thought about me. I really was. And so I was so ego driven. I was losing sight of trying to do the right thing And it wasn't that was manifesting in how I might behave or direct my team. It just made me less confident. So anybody who really understood human psychology and could understand me would probably be able to see through me quite easily. And so that brought with it an uncertainty and then a defensiveness that definitely impaired my confidence and job satisfaction and some of the key relationships I was having in the business with peers and at one stage with a boss. So he really got me to think about how can I develop maybe a spiritual practice, but certainly become a lot more reflective of what my strengths and weaknesses were and how I felt about myself. One of the saddest things in recent years has been me and Michael falling out, mainly over Brexit, but also his antipathy towards Jeremy Corbyn, who became the leader of the Labour Party. I was kind of not a supporter of Corbyn, but I was, not that I had a stake and I didn't have a vote in the leadership election, but I thought Corbyn was asking some very important questions. But Michael didn't really like him at all, and anyway, Michael became really agitated over the whole thing about Brexit, and that ultimately led to him cutting me off. And I've talked about this in the past at some length about how our relationship broke down, but it remains a really sad episode. We were such good friends, but he took the whole Brexit thing so personally. Yeah. It was on Michael's recommendation that I went on a meditation course for a week in Somerset, and I've kind of been interested in this thing for quite some time, but it really got me to think about how it might help me both understand myself a little bit better, and boy did it do that, but also to develop a psychological equilibrium where in my line of work as a management consultant and trainer, I would be better able to cope with the ups and the downs, so just smooth things out over time. And it was a fantastic experience, and I went back and did some more meditation, not for such a long time, and kept up the practice for a while, and there's no doubt about it, it definitely provided me with some significant benefits. But like many people, I kind of let it fall by the wayside. I have absolutely no doubt today that Michael is still diligently meditating at least twice a day and still gaining the benefit from it.